Hello there, Henry again from Hot Homes of Sampson Properties, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the market, but also some of the terms that you might hear thrown around that usually don't really get defined. So I'm recording this video in late June, early July of 2022, so that'll just give you an idea of how recent this information is. If it's been a while, then things might have changed a little bit. For starters, interest rates are on the rise. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, interest is how the banks make money from loaning money to home buyers like yourself. So basically, the higher the interest rate is, the more expensive it is to borrow money. So currently, the rates for a 30-year fixed mortgage, conventional loan, again, you don't really necessarily have to know what any of that stuff is. That's where the education part comes in from agents like myself, as well as a great lender. But the interest rates are currently hovering around 6%, just below currently, but it's expected that it will go above. For perspective, the lowest the interest rates have ever been is December of 2020, and I actually have the exact number here, where the interest rate was 2.68. So that was the lowest that the interest rates have ever been. But let's actually take a look at the highest. In October of 1981, the interest rate was 18.63%, which is significantly higher. So in plain English, the higher the interest rate, the higher your monthly payment. Now, if you would like a real-world scenario breakdown of how much a change in interest rates will actually affect you, feel free to reach out and we'd be happy to run a scenario for you. Next on are property values. So typically property values just constantly rise. It's very, very seldom that property values actually tank. And the 2007-2008 market was really the only recession and only time that we saw property values really, really go low. And that was because of a unique set of circumstances. And ever since then, a lot of practices were put into place to prevent something like that from happening. So if you're expecting a market where home values get cut in half, it's more than likely it's not going to happen. The only thing that I would say is that, like, if the half of the East Coast fell into the ocean, then yeah, sure, maybe some of the property values would go down. But aside from that, more than likely not. The DMV, or DC, Maryland, Virginia area is a pretty unique market because there are so many jobs that bring people in from all over, both internationally as well as locally. And because of that, there are always people who are moving here who need homes. And typically that number exceeds the number of people who are actually looking to sell their homes. A lot of times people who purchase a house end up renting it out just because the rent amounts are so high. So this is all to say that typically property values hold pretty well. And even during the 2007-2008 crash, it didn't take very much longer for the market to get back to where it was and then exceed it. Some of the tertiary markets or the markets that are further away from the actual city, those maybe took anywhere from 5 to 6 years before they regulated back to the height of the market prices. And that was for homes that were further out. The closer you got to the city, the faster it recovered. Now, one of the other things that you might hear people say is an increase in inventory. Well, what does inventory actually mean? Inventory is simply the number of homes that are available for sale. Now, one of the things that you might also hear about is absorption rate, or months of inventory. So if you're hearing months of inventory, somebody saying we have 3 months of inventory, then what that means is that if no other homes came onto the market, how long would it take for the market, for all of those homes to sell? And then we can do that based on calculations on how quickly homes are selling, how many buyers there are out there, all that good and fancy stuff. Now, what would be considered a balanced market? A balanced market would be 6 months of inventory, meaning if that no homes came onto the market, then it would take about 6 months for the existing inventory to completely sell off. In the DMV, we've been in a seller's market for a pretty significant amount of time. Obviously, during the pandemic market boom, the market was even more heavily favoring the sellers, but things are currently cooling off, which would hopefully give some buyers a little bit better chance of putting in a reasonable offer with some reasonable protections. So when you hear about all the news about what's happening in the real estate market, you got to understand, too, that the DMV is pretty unique, again, because of the job situation, the number of military bases that are nearby, all of the support and jobs that are available. So that all makes the DC market a pretty stable market and a very good one to buy into, but it also makes it a very expensive one to buy into. In the cost of living video that I put on YouTube, it's been said, too, that the DC market is one of the top 5 most expensive markets in the United States. However, being on the East Coast, we do have the benefit of seeing what happens on the market on the West Coast, because real estate trends tend to move from West Coast to East Coast. And fortunately, we get the benefit of seeing what's happening on the West Coast and like the LA, San Francisco markets, and seeing how that affects us over here on the East Coast. So that's a quick overview of what the market looks like right now, and a quick overview of what some of those terms are. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll see you on next week's video. Take care.